Welcome back to another edition of the Unreasonable Odds podcast. I'm back in the hosting chair. Not usually something I do anymore. Too busy. Baseball's going on. Football's going on. I can't take everything at the same time. But I have to come back for a very special episode. Our guy, you know this guy. I don't need to introduce him. But Adam Levitan in the guest chair with us for this week, going over everything week one as we get you set right around the corner. So as always, excited to have Adam Levitan on. Real quick, just let everybody know where you're at now, where they can find you. Then we'll start getting into some of the information for week one.
Yeah, I've missed you guys. I hope everybody's well with you guys and at DraftKings. Yeah, you can always find my stuff on establishtheRun.com, but I'm excited to be here and talk some week one with you guys.
And I can't stress how good establishtheRun.com is as well. If you need some more information, some guidance on a week-to-week basis, I would absolutely check out establishtheRun.com. Really good crew over there. And of course, our guy, Adam Levitan. Julian Edlow is here as well as my handsome co-host, rocking the DraftKings wear. We're going to talk everything to do with week one. But as always, Julian, you can kick us off here. We're going to start off the show with Adam Levitan and our favorite, Know You Better.
Yeah, so we will, I mean, we already know Adam. Adam used to be a DraftKings guy, but we'll get to know him a little bit better. And we always start off with our guests. I don't need to know an amount. It doesn't even need to be the biggest numerical number that you have won in your sports betting career. But what is your favorite win of your sports betting career?
Good question. You know, you guys know me pretty well. I don't bet a lot of sides and totals and stuff like that, just because like I'm so insane where I can't get it in where I think it's bad, or it might even just be like break even. I can't do it. It makes my stomach like churn. And so I've mostly only played fantasy and poker through my life. And so I don't have a lot of stories about betting on sports. I think that I've had some long shots in futures that were looking good that didn't quite get there. And I think
favorite almost wins. I have a few of those.
Yeah, I mean, like the 40-1 and the 50-1 stuff that like that gets really close is like really good in theory, you know, but it's like really painful at the end. And I don't really like to hedge out of stuff like that. So yeah, you know, in the futures market, I think is where I would have most of my bad and good beats, but I don't even remember them that well, man. It's like one big blur. I can't even I can't even like face it anymore.
And you know, being someone that's played poker a lot in their life as well, one of the big things that they say is like we always forget about our wins, but we always seem to remember our losses. So with that idea, what's one of the worst beats that you've taken that you can recall?
You know, I was in college. This was, I think, maybe 2002, 2003, and there was a Giants Vikings playoff game, and I think the total was like 43. And we had, you know, me and all my friends, we bet a lot for us at the time on the over. And at the end of the first half, I think it was on the total was on 40. It was like 20-20 or like 23-17 at the half, and it ended up being no more points scored in the entire game. And I remember that one. I remember that one well as a sports thing, but man, I mean, you know, that was 20 something years ago. So yeah, it's there's always going to be stuff like that. What do you think is our brain concocts outliers with beats as something that is not as much more of an outlier than it really is, like something that happens 10 or 20% of the time, you know, happens 10 or 20% of the time. I think people don't understand how often that is.
Yeah.
All right, let's forget the past. We'll move on to the future a little bit. Year by year, more trends, more numbers, more analytics come out. Some of them that we put weight on, some of them that we don't. What is a trend or a stat or a number going into this football season, whether it be for fantasy, for betting player props, anything you want that you think carries weight? It's legit.
Yeah, I mean, God, I think legit is overall macro trends in the NFL, more teams playing optimally. In other words, pass rate over expectation is going up. More teams with 3 and 4 wide sets, more teams going for it on fourth down. And that's going to lead to more points. You know, I've heard people say that last year was an outlier with offensive efficiency because of COVID, and defenses were behind the offenses because of COVID. You know, maybe that has a little bit to do with it, but I just think coaches are getting sharper. You know, at least 10, 12, 13, 14 of them aren't like stone dunces anymore. And so you start to get more offensive efficiency. And so if you're not baking that in to whatever model or system you're using, I think you're making a mistake. In other words, like if you still have data from 3-4 years ago on decision making that coaches are going to make in your model, I think that starts to need to be regressed out. So yeah, I think the NFL has changed a lot and is continuing to change in that way.
So in that same sense, what's one that you like to ignore? It's almost NFL season, so air yards is something that comes up a lot. People love to debate about betting the under on a team that's playing on Thursday Night Football with the short week. Anything that kind of comes up that you just always completely ignore and just shut out the noise on that.
Yeah, I think the betting stuff, once it hits the mainstream, it's over. Like I do think that there used to be value in, West Coast team going East Coast for 1 p.m. game. Now the market has adjusted to that. And you can see in the data that like is no longer an edge. And like anything that you think, that is being talked about on like ESPN or even, on Twitter or whatever, like it's almost certainly baked into the market. So I would be really careful for people who are out there who are just like hearing about trends on Twitter. It's almost certainly BS. I think for sure. And in fantasy, I think a lot of people now are talking about like sims and running sims. I don't think people understand exactly what that means because you can run a million sims all you want. If you have, I don't know if I can say, you can bleep that out if I can't, Samir, but
we're going to cut it, but I appreciate it.
It's still the sims that people are running are I think going to be with bad data or not contextualized data, and it's really dangerous. I'm worried for people who think that they have the next skeleton key in fantasy, and I really don't think that's the way you win in DFS.
Well, the good news is you didn't break the record for swearing on the podcast. That was done by Sam Panayotowicz 10 seconds in. I didn't even tell you that swearing wasn't allowed. I told him and he broke it 10 seconds in. So he will forever have the record. First sentence.
Right.
But also we're all adults here. One day we'll have our way on here. My vocabulary is not very good. So it would probably help me to be able to use some of those words. Okay. Anyway, that's my swearing rant. Let's get into some actual football. So you mentioned that you are not as much of a sides and total guy. And I think when it comes to week 1, it is probably even more difficult to identify some of those when we don't know anything about these teams. At least we got a preseason this year, unlike the COVID season where we didn't even get to see any of that. I think I know your answer here is probably going to be no, but are you betting any sides or totals in week 1?
So I've taken a couple of things just based on news. When the Wentz news broke, I took Seahawks money line, Seahawks first half, Seahawks full game, and then he's going to shove it down my throat because Wentz is going to end up playing, and I don't think I'm going to get any value on that.
I did the same.
Line.
Yeah, we all did the same.
Yeah, it seemed like it was good at the time. I'll bet stuff for fun. And believe me, betting sides and totals is pure fun. Not everybody has to be like a sick person like me. I think that the way the Giants are hobbling into week 1 scares me. That said, it like pains me to bet a road favorite. And I know that the home dog stuff has pretty much been priced into the market now, but I still think like the public gets all over these road favorites, and we'll see if they do so on the Broncos Giants game. But I just don't like the way the Giants are coming into this season so banged up and already lacking talent in a lot of important spots anyways. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I think the Seahawks are just much better than the Colts anyways. Like, even if Wentz plays, I think the Seahawks are much better than the Colts, but that's another road favorite. So God, I mean, what am I doing out here? I'm just John Q public.
Well, the good news is that at least we all have Seattle as a dog.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I liked him anyway coming into that one. And then we got the news, had to bet it. You got the +3, got the +125 money line in. Here's the thing though, like Wentz and Nelson can play. That's fine. The Colts have still gotten like dinged up all over the place.
Yep.
I just feel like they're, as a team that's thought of as being like a well-rounded team with talent all across the field and decent depth, like that narrative is starting to go away on them. And Wentz always gets hurt. Like he's going to get hurt again. Not that it's going to be in week 1, but just for the season outlook. So I'm still down on the Colts regardless after just a kind of a messy training camp.
Well, not only that, and then Julian and I immediately, when Wentz went down with the injury, immediately took them to miss the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything already we have all that too.
And the Titans to make the playoffs. And I have some Wentz yardage under. It's all strung together here.
Yeah. Right. I mean, to be fair, I mean, Wentz was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL last year by like any metric or data point. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be funny. Wentz was like the worst quarterback in the NFL last year. So I think he'll play better this year. But, you know, starting off with foot surgery is certainly not great.
Do you think that offensive line is really going to bring out, because we all know he can be good. I mean, we've seen it before. Obviously, he's had, MVP type seasons in the past couple of years. With that much stronger offensive line in front of him, though, how much of a difference do you think that's going to make for his performance?
Yeah, I consider sacks a quarterback stat, not an offensive line stat. And I mean, yeah, the Eagles offensive line got so banged up, and the Colts line, I think, is not as elite as some people think it is. Like we have them 11th overall going into the season, and that's with a healthy Quentin Nelson. So I mean, they're good. They're not great. So he just holds the ball too long, and so I think it's just quarterback stat is sack, not offensive line stats. So it makes a little bit of difference for him. I don't think it makes too big a difference.
One question I wanted to get into too as well, sorry to cut you off, Julian, was a couple of weeks ago, I was talking on the show that I like the Dolphins going against the Patriots. That's before we even knew that Mac Jones was going to come in. One of the big bets that was on DraftKings Sportsbook was that Mac Jones was a huge underdog to take the first snap of the season. It was like, I think it was like, what was it down to? Plus 265.
So he was, I did actually reach out to the Sportsbook ops guys and got some numbers here. He was for a while posted at plus 225. Yes. Minus 300. No, for Mac Jones on the first snap. And then when Cam Newton got the 5-day, had to be away from the team for 5 days, for the traveling, whatever, didn't get the appropriate tests. That got bet down to plus 150, and that's when it got taken off the board, and we never saw it again.
Yeah.
When it closed at plus 150, 25% of the bets and 24% of the handle were on the yes at plus money.
Wow. Okay. But the reason I bring this up is that once the news that Mac Jones was going to be the starter came, I was waiting for the market to shift on this game. It never really shifted at all. The Dolphins are still 2.5 point underdogs in this game, plus 130 as the road dogs here. Do you think that is more of indicative that this was maybe already baked in a bit, or, is it really just still an even feel between these two teams? Because I expected some shift with Mac Jones coming in, but there wasn't really at all.
You thought, which way did you think it would go?
That's going to be my question.
Well, I thought there would be more on the Dolphins, because now they're going up against a rookie quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Making his first start. Obviously, the Dolphins improved during the offseason, but it never moved.
Yeah, I guess I would disagree in that I think Mac gives them a better chance to win than Cam. I kind of always thought that. So if anything, I would have thought the line would go the other way, especially with how well Mac played in the preseason. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have a real take on that game. I agree with you. I think the Dolphins are good. The Patriots, I think with Mac, I would have been more inclined to bet the Dolphins if Cam was starting. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
All right. So sticking with the week one board, before we move on to the DFS player prop side, my best bet, Steve's best bet stinks. Dolphins, that's a dumb bet. It's Pats or nothing for me. My favorite bet in week
2
one,
weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, you said it. That you gave it as your best bet. It should be something that nothing can change that would make this best bet not work.
Well, according to the board, it was going to be Cam Newton, to be fair.
Whatever. I'm going with a massive road favorite. I'm fading the Lions to start this season as much as I can, with Dan Campbell as the head coach, with Anthony Lynn as the offensive coordinator, with literally nobody for Jared Goff to throw the ball to. I'm laying the 7 with the 49ers on the road here. I think they are going to beat the pulp out of the Lions. Don't like laying a touchdown on the road in week one, but I am going to it. Thoughts on that, and thoughts on the Lions to begin this season, because I think they're going to be a dumpster fire.
Yeah. I mean, they have pretty good, I think, offensive line play, if not very good. And I think, they have pretty good, if not very good, defensive line play. besides that, obviously they're just a stone disaster. But man, I mean, you can figure it out in the NFL if you can do those two things and win, 4, 5, 6 games. So I know everybody thinks the Lions are like the stone worst. I don't know, man. I think like the difference between them and the Texans to me is massive. Like I think the Lions would beat the Texans by like 20 on a neutral field. Like it wouldn't even be close. And so I don't know. I hear you. I think that's probably a stay away for me with the 7. I don't know. I'm hesitant to say that this like complete donkey smash mouth, we're gonna win in the trenches style, like can't win if they execute it right and like cover some 7s at home, like
For me,
that's a lot.
For me, it's not only Campbell who's just like I don't even know how to describe him. He's just like a football guy, and I don't know if he knows how to coach, but it's that Anthony Lynn, who cost the Chargers, 2, 3 wins, however many last year, is now running that offense that just doesn't have any talent on it besides, a mediocre quarterback and, like you said, the line play. But skill position wise, I'm scared there of how that's going to work. But I do want to talk about one thing you said before we move on, how much better you think the Lions are than the Texans. So what does this mean for the Texans this season? Like, the last number 1 overall pick rookie quarterback to win a game in week 1 was David Carr, not Derek Carr. He obviously wasn't the number 1 pick. David Carr of the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
And we have a number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, a road favorite in week 1, which is unbelievable, but it is against the dreadful Texans. Like, how hard do we need to fade this Texans team? How bad is it?
Oh, I think the Jaguars will win the game. I mean, Urban Meyer is a stone dolt too, but I just think from a talent perspective, like the Jaguars are just so much better at every position. Yeah, I think the Jaguars will win the game. I'd love to get a 2.5. I don't know if that's going to be out there. I see 3 -105 on DraftKings right now. I'd love to get a 2.5, but maybe that can come closer to kick. I don't know.
All right. Steve, you got anything else on week 1 sides, totals, anything you want to talk about?
No, we can do the player props.
Okay. Well, we'll go over to the DFS side before we do player props. Obviously week 1, unlike any slate throughout the season, because we get those salaries at the end of July. We get them 6 weeks in advance, whereas everything else comes out obviously a week in advance. So a lot is going to change. The most is going to change. We're bound to always get those cheap chalk plays that are going to be 85% owned in cash. And I know Adam is a cash player. I'm more of a cash player. Steve likes to flush his money down the toilet in GPPs. No, I'm just kidding. I would like to actually get more involved in GPPs this season. That is something that I have on my agenda. But going into this week 1 slate, I guess we used to have an article called Levitan's Leverage that was featured on the DraftKings playbook. Any notes that you want to bring up for the week 1 slate?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to think of it as you need to understand you're going to need an incredible amount of points to win in week 1 because we have these outrageous values, like Julian said. So much has happened in the last 6 weeks, and there's no way the salaries can account for it. And they already made the salaries, kind of soft because they're, quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of casual people playing and they don't want them to have to jam in like the 4th wide receiver on the Vikings and stuff like that, because that's not fun for anyone. And so, yeah, I would think, just because your team looks really good, like everybody else's team is going to look really, really good also. And so I'd be really careful there. I think the Bengals pass catchers stood out to me as underpriced. I think the Marquez Callaway stuff is interesting. He obviously came from nowhere. I believe he's 3,400 in week 1. I like Jerry Jeudy a lot. Like there's just going to be a lot of pass catchers and so that are underpriced. And so like the way that I would prefer to build would be to take the safety of, Christian McCaffrey is priced appropriately, but you can still take the safety of Christian McCaffrey and you can still take the safety of whatever other really high floor, high ceiling running back you like, Dalvin or whoever else you like, and still fit in some outrageous wide receivers that have really high upside. And so, yeah, I mean, there's going to be some ridiculous teams out there. It would not shock me if you needed like 240, 250 DraftKings points to win tournaments in week 1.
Yeah, Julian and I were even talking about that Bengals stack. Like you take Burrow, Chase, and Boyd, like you have nobody more expensive than 5,700, which is Burrow. Chase is 4,800, Tyler Boyd 5,200. Like if you wanted to do that 3-man stack, so unbelievably incredibly cheap, but with so much time to look at this, like it's not going to be like a surprise. People aren't going to be like, oh, I didn't even realize how cheap that stack was. Like that probably is going to end up being one of the more popular stacks. But like you mentioned, like the salary is soft. Like that's how it is for the first couple of weeks here. But like just looking at some of the value on here, there's so many different directions that you can go in week 1.
Right, and it's a really big slate. I mean, I believe is it really a 16-game slate? I mean, yeah. I mean that is that is insane, and so if ownership clusters, like obviously in tournaments you're gonna be able to find some pretty good leverage, and to your point about not sneaking anything by anyone, like when I first started playing DFS in like 2014, like you could sneak a ton of stuff by people. Now everybody's playing so projection based, and I think having understanding of what the projections are, even if you don't want to use them to make your lineups, is really, really important. I would encourage people to do, just so and then comparing projection versus ownership and stuff like that. That's become just DFS table stakes. I mean, without that, you really can't even really give yourself a reasonable chance to win. And so yeah, like you said, we are still working on our projections right now. We'll have the first run up on Wednesday, but I'm confident in saying the Bengals stuff is going to project really well.
All right, so let's transition, I guess, from the DFS side of things to the player prop side of things. And before we go to season long, which I think is a really interesting conversation to have, and even if it's getting late to bet some of those, I think it's still interesting to talk about what was there, what we can look for in future seasons, and what maybe is still there, why things moved the way they moved. Specific to week 1 player props, which obviously aren't around yet. Is there anything that you kind of have your eye on that you're like, I really want to see? I think this could come out around here. Any players that you're really interested to try and find for week 1?
No, not off the top of my head. I think when you start to do that, you start to think about overs too much, like guys you really like in fantasy, and you're like, oh, let me bet they're over in week 1 also. Right. And I don't really like to go down that path too much. I'll simply just, once they come out, I'll compare our projection to the prop in week 1 and see what I can find in terms of mostly leaning unders, just because, we project in mean, but really you should be thinking about player props as mean versus median. In other words, like Marquez Valdez-Scantling might have 3 games this year of 200 yards, which is going to pull up his mean. But if you bet his under every week, he's going to go under, 60, 70% of the time, because the mean gets dragged up. And so I would really encourage people to think about unders because of the mean versus median stuff. That's the biggest thing I would say, for week 1 for sure. But yeah, I mean, God, DraftKings is if the season long player prop menu is any indication, they're posting so many player props. I mean, it was insane. I took like literally 45 things on DraftKings and I couldn't stop. And I'm tying up all this money, for 6 months or whatever it's going to be. I mean, and I still couldn't pass on it because I thought the edge was like 10, 20, 25, 30%. And like, who would I be? What kind of man would I be if I was passing on things that were 10, 20, 30% edges, And so I have all this money tied up now. I mean, but I couldn't pass on it. And so if that's any indication of what DraftKings and SB Tech is going to do during the regular season, I mean, I'm going to be absolutely blasting off once these come up. I mean, there's going to be hundreds of options, I think. And yeah, I mean, I'll be ready to fire.
All right. Well, I think I can say with confidence that the season-long menu is an indication of the weekly menu, because the Sportsbook team at DraftKings just tells me and Steve, like, if you want to make a bet, if there's something you want to bet on, tell us and we'll post it. So it sounds like a lot of things can be posted. If there's anything you want to see, let us know. We'll put it in the work.
Well, I mean, yeah, I want to see a prop on every wide receiver who's going to get a snap. Let's do that. Let's start there and see what they say. If you're going to play on Sunday, let's get a prop up.
Fair enough. We just need somebody to decide if how many wide receivers are actually playing.
Fine, I'll settle for top 3. The top 3 wide receiver on every team and top 2 running backs on every team. Let's get a prop up.
That sounds fun. We'll see if we can do that. All right. So going to the season long type of things, and you're talking about the value in weekly unders. The value in season long unders is ridiculous because it's for the most part factored in for what your numbers to play every game are going to be. And it's the NFL and people get hurt. So taking unders, you can just fall backwards into a win. Even if the player gets hurt in November.
Well, forget about November. I took 3 on DraftKings that are already look good because of they're already hurt. I mean, I have T.Y. Hilton under, I have John Brown under, I have Rashad Perriman under. I mean, Perriman and John Brown are already cut. They need to play a snap for the bet to have action, but they'll, Perriman already got picked up by the Bears. He'll end up playing a snap. I think John Brown hopefully will end up playing a snap. So yeah, I mean, it's not just hurt in the middle of the season. It's hurt before the season. It's hurt in the middle of the season. It's you lose your role. It's your team rests you. It's right. Whatever your volume isn't what everybody expected. I mean, it's crazy.
So let's start with this without no specific player or anything, unless you want to use an example. Aside from these guys that you just mentioned, who you're looking in good shape before the season starts, what is your mindset, I guess? What are you mentioned these 30% edges. What exactly are you looking for? Are you just comparing your projections to the number that gets posted? Are you considering injury history, a combination of things? What is the first thing you look for when these pop up and you say, I need to get going on these DraftKings season long props?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I would do is think about players whose role is somewhat uncertain. And so, like, I think a good example of that would be DJ Chark, who, got kind of called out by Urban Meyer, and then he had the pinky injury or the finger injury or whatever he had. He had surgery. We also don't know if he's going to be the alpha or if it will be Laviska Shenault or Marvin Jones. And so, we had DJ Chark's receiving yard projection at 818.9 yards. The line was 905.5, and that was on August 15th. I don't know what it is now. So anytime like the line, it's an uncertain situation, our projection is close or under the line. I mean, it's just an absolute no-brainer, like absolute print fest. And so like if I can take things like that over and over again, where uncertain role, we think the volume might be not what everybody assumes it will be, and our projection is under, and we haven't even started to factor in rest, health, signing someone, who knows what could happen, injury to Trevor Lawrence. There's like a million things that could happen that would send that under. And so, things like that I think is pretty easy to find and pick off. Especially an injury to Trevor Lawrence after literally just dumping Gardner Minshew for a 6th-round pick or whatever it was. Say that for me again. It was Chark. The number was under 905.5 yards under. That was August 15th. Okay, so that number is still available. It's just minus 130 juiced to the under there, but the 905.5 is still available on DraftKings Sportsbook if that's a place that you want to look. I'm just rifling through the board here to see where things stand. Steve, you got anything on player props?
Well, I think actually just kind of going off of this, they have this like team special section, and it's almost like these parlays that you can do, but like going to like
you go to the parlays.
Well, yeah, of course. But going off of like what Adam said, like, so for example, this is one for Tampa Bay. Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans combined to go 3,500 total receiving yards, right? So the yes on that is plus 400. If you break that down, right, by game, each player needs about 68 receiving yards per game on average for this bet to hit. You look at that though, and it's like, okay, but can we rely upon Antonio Brown to play a full season? What if Mike Evans gets hurt because he has some injury stuff? Like, it's an appealing number because you look at that, you go, okay, Tom Brady's always going to throw. I get plus 400 on this. But when you start to take into account, like what Adam was saying, maybe this is something that you don't take when you're looking at something else. But some of these ones that are on here are just like remarkable that way you can take.
Yeah, I didn't look at those because it's kind of hard to do like. It's kind of hard to figure out the exact math on some of those, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's value there if you hunt it for sure.
I'm scared. I'm terrified of those because I'm scared to play an over on one player. I played like 3 or 4 overs, and like if you're going to play an over on 3 guys and you're saying they need 68 yards per game, but now you need 3 receivers to play 17 games, like that's never going to happen. Obviously, at least one of them is going to get hurt. probably 2. Maybe all 3 don't even play all 17 games. So that gets a little dicey for me when you're counting. Like, we're relying on health for these guys if you're playing it over, and now you're exposing yourself 3 times as much.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to figure out the math on that if plus 400 is enough. I would guess that it's not, but I it's really hard to figure out.
All right, I'll go to a couple of things. I'm gonna see if they're still up here. An over that I actually did play. I did play. This was even money at the time. It's now minus 105. I did play Trevor Lawrence over 3.5 rushing touchdowns on the season. This was prior to an ETN injury, if you want to factor in, even though he's a pass catcher, a running back going down. I just feel like the only way this doesn't get there is an injury. Lawrence in his last 17 games at Clemson, yes, it's Clemson, rushed for 25 touchdowns. And last year there were, I think, 10 quarterbacks that ran for at least 4 touchdowns. And that doesn't include Dak ran for 3 in 5 games, and Burrow and Tua both ran for 3 in 5 games. I felt like this was a really low number on a guy that might be a little mobile.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is one that you're going to say that there's no edge on. I know.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I mean, we have, I mean, it's really hard to project quarterback rushing touchdowns. We only have him for 2.2, but I wouldn't feel that confident in
the under
in that projection at all. I think like touchdowns overall as a prop are like way more variant than the receiving ones. Like, let's say by some stroke of luck, they get pass interference, 6 times this season in the end zone, or 10 times this season in the end zone, and you get like 4 Trevor Lawrence sneaks from the 1 yard line or something like that. Like, obviously, like that would be huge. But let's say that instead of the pass interferences, guys catch the ball 6 times and there's no pass interference or whatever, and then all of a sudden they just turn into passing touchdowns for Trevor Lawrence or whatever. Like, there's just so much variance in rushing in touchdowns as a whole. I try not to get too heavy on those. I have a couple touchdown bets. I think I have DeAndre Swift under 8.5 touchdowns, but
the Lions might not score 8.5 touchdowns this season.
Yeah.
So
I have Swift under 8.5. I took that on August 3rd, though. That was almost a month ago. That under was minus 140 at the time. But yeah, I like that one just because I think Jamal Williams will be used even in those pass interference in the end zone situations. Yeah, I don't have too many touchdown bets.
All right, let's go. Here's another, maybe weird one that I took, but there's definitely some value. Do you have sack projections?
Do not, no.
Okay. So this one we're just gonna fire from the hip then. JJ Watt is even money for under 8.5 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
DraftKings Sportsbook has the best number as far as I know in the industry here. I think there's a lot of 7.5s out there. So getting the even money on 8.5 jumped out to me right away. And then just from the numbers, like, so from 2012 to 2015, he averaged almost 17.5 sacks per season, had 2 seasons of 20.5 sacks. He was playing all the time. He was winning Defensive Player of the Year. Then he got hurt and didn't get it in several seasons.
Yeah.
But he did play in all 16 games last year, and I think it was 5.5 that he had while playing in all 16 games. So I'm just saying that he's not going to be the same player with a new team in Arizona. And then just because he had 1 healthy season, he's coming off 3 injury-plagued seasons. He could just get hurt again. So this one I like much more than the Lawrence one, bet it more than the Lawrence one, and just feel like, you're getting 1 extra sack than other books are giving you, and you're getting even money on an older player that hasn't really proved his health.
That sounds good to me. I mean, I'm always down to go unders on older players for sure with an injury history. I mean, that was just like the Stone T.Y. Hilton bet was just like so easy. I mean, God, the guy looked like he was off a cliff last year, Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure you can make the same case for JJ Watt. I've never played an IDP league. I don't even know. I couldn't even begin to start with the sack stuff.
Neither do I. The only reason it caught my eye was because I saw some other 7.5s and then said, oh, wait a second, under 8.5 at even money. Let me go back, look at his numbers and whatnot. And here we are. Steve, stop being a coward. You got any plays?
I haven't really done too much of the player props so far. I was kind of actually going to dive into that this weekend a little bit, but I like that Hilton one a lot that Adam brought up. I'm actually probably going to go take a look at that too myself. I didn't even really consider him, obviously, with the injuries.
Is Hilton still up?
No, that's got to be gone. He could be done for the season.
Yeah. But yeah, this weekend I was really going to kind of take a dive into the player props, but I think now is the time to really start hammering these home and taking a look at these now that we have the cuts and we have pretty much all the injury news that we need coming into this. So I think if there was a time that you were going to look at it, this would definitely be the weekend to start jumping into these.
All right, I'm cruising through the board here, making sure that we have everything covered. I think that we're there. I think we're prepared for week one. I think we've gotten in as much of the season long stuff as we can. I have no closing thoughts other than that the 49ers will be my -7 will be my play. The 49ers in a money line parlay in some form will be my play. The 49ers teased in some way will be my play. And those are really my closing thoughts. Fade the Lions early. They're going to be at least a touchdown dog in each of their first 3 games. They go to Green Bay week 2. They got Baltimore week 3. Do with that information as you want. Steve, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still going to ride the Dolphins. Yeah, I don't care. I still think the Dolphins are the play.
Yeah. All right. Oh, good luck to you, Mr. Adam Levitan of Establish the Run. Any parting thoughts here for the Unreasonable Odds podcast?
No. Good to see you guys, and thanks for having me, and good luck this year. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would assume. Well, I don't know. Do you guys think that it's mostly fantasy people listening to this, or is it people betting on sports listening to this?
I think it's a good mix.
It's good. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good mix. Obviously, the Unreasonable Odds name, it's a little bit more of a gambling podcast where we're doing a lot of work with DK Sportsbook, so it should be a pretty good mix at this point.
Yeah. All I would say is that if you play fantasy seriously and you think you're good at fantasy and you've been winning on DraftKings, like, I mean, look at the player props, man. My God, there's going to be so many, and I think it's maybe not at like the Super Bowl. I had Byron Pringle under 1.5 catches. So I spent the entire Super Bowl, like I had a lot on it. And I spent the entire Super Bowl just rooting for Byron Pringle not to make a catch. And I mean, like, that's no way to live, right? Like, it's not that fun. Like, everybody else was like enjoying themselves and watching the game and rooting for the Chiefs or whoever they bet on. Like, I was just out there stalking every play, making sure Byron Pringle wasn't.
I don't even remember. I assume he went catchless, or did he have one?
They ski on literally the first play of the game. They gave him a bubble screen, and he had a catch on the very first play of the game. Then he didn't have another one for the rest of the game.
So one right off the bat, and then you had to sweat no more catches for the entire rest of the game.
It's not as fun as betting size and totals, but I do think that if you're good at fantasy, you can really. I think you can win. And so for me, that's what matters.
I mean, the research is built in already. Like, you're literally doing the research already and you don't even realize. So I 100% agree too as well. And then, of course, to jump off of that, establishthorun.com, make sure to check them out this upcoming season. Just a plethora of information all season long. That's where you want to go.
Okay. So yes. And follow him on Twitter at Adam Levitan. Good ETR plug right there. We have other things to plug, Steve. After years, we have an Unreasonable Odds Twitter handle. Of course, there wasn't enough room to spell the whole thing, but it is at Unreasonable Odd. So you can go find that and follow us on Twitter. And starting for the NFL season, starting on Monday, September 13th, we will start to have 2 episodes of Unreasonable Odds per week, a Monday episode and a Thursday episode. So we'll have a lot more content for you. We're going to have a lot of great guests throughout the sports betting community on these podcasts. It sounds like we're going to have Johnny Edlow on with us on Mondays to talk some sportsbook shop, the head honcho over there at DK Sportsbook. So that is pretty exciting. So yeah, follow the podcast on Twitter at Unreasonable Odds, and we're going to be coming at you twice a week starting NFL season. Good luck to all of you in week 1.